A little girl in a white dress crashed into me, wrecked my $65 cake. Now her mother is suing me for $3,000. WIBTA if I countersue? This whole mess started back in the middle of June, and honestly, I still can't believe how ridiculous it's become. At first, I thought it was just an embarrassing little accident, the kind of thing you brush off, laugh about later, and move on from. But now, months later, I'm staring down a lawsuit, and I'm asking myself if I'd be the jerk for filing a countersuit just to make a point. Here's what happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, hot and sunny, and I had just picked up a custom chocolate cake from a local bakery. It wasn't just any cake. It was a $65 custom order, boxed neatly with a lid. I had been looking forward to it all week. I balanced the box carefully in my hands as I crossed the street back toward my car, walking through a marked crosswalk about half a block away from church where a wedding was going on. At the same time, a woman and her 2 children were leaving the church grounds. I didn't think much of it. The mother was in her mid-30s maybe, dressed up for the occasion, and her 2 kids were with her, a little boy holding her hand, and a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, in a very nice white dress. The girl wasn't walking calmly. She was bouncing around, laughing, not paying attention to where she was going. I clearly heard the mother tell her to stop jumping and stay still. The mom's tone was that tired, warning tone parents use when they know their kid is testing their patience. But the little girl didn't listen. She laughed harder, spun around, and kept darting back and forth on the grass. At this point, I wasn't concerned. She was still on the grass, not on the sidewalk, and I was just trying to get back to my car with my cake intact. But in literally a split second, everything changed. The girl suddenly bolted off the grass, not looking where she was going. Her eyes turned back toward her mother as she laughed. She ran full speed straight into me. I had no time to react. 1 second, I was holding the cake steady in both hands, and the next, the impact jolted me hard enough that the box flew downward. The lid popped open when it hit the pavement, and the cake exploded on contact. Chocolate icing went everywhere. It splattered across the sidewalk, smeared all over the knees of my pants, and, worst of all, splashed all over the bottom half of the little girl's pristine white dress. It looked like someone had poured chocolate syrup directly on her. I froze in shock, staring down at what used to be my beautiful cake. It was now a pile of mush, smeared across the pavement. Meanwhile, the little girl stood there wide-eyed, realizing too late what had happened. Before I could even gather my thoughts, her mother came running, and she was screaming. Not at her daughter, not even at the situation, but at me. She started yelling that I had ruined her daughter's dress, that I owed her money for a new one, and that I needed to give her cash immediately so she could replace it before the ceremony. I was stunned. I said, "Wait, your daughter ran into me. It was an accident. I didn't do anything to her dress." But she wasn't hearing it. She just kept escalating, her voice rising until people across the street started staring. At least 2 people walking behind me stopped and looked, and I noticed another woman from the church watching from the steps. All of them had seen the little girl run into me, but the mother didn't care. She shouted profanity, waving her arms, demanding I hand over money right then and there. I kept trying to explain. It was an accident, I wasn't at fault, and I wasn't going to hand over cash for something her child had caused. But she wasn't calming down. She just screamed louder, her face turning red. It got so intense that someone actually called the police. And that, unbelievably, was only the beginning of this saga. By the time the police showed up, the situation had spiraled completely out of control. The mother was still shouting at me. Her daughter was crying in her messy dress, and I was standing there with chocolate smeared down my legs, staring at what used to be a perfectly good $65 cake, now splattered across the sidewalk. The officers separated us immediately. One asked me what had happened, while the other tried to calm the mother down. She wasn't making it easy. She was sobbing and yelling at the same time, pointing at her daughter's dress and insisting that I had attacked them. Yes, you read that right. She claimed that I had thrown the cake at her little girl on purpose. I was floored. I told the officer exactly what happened. I was crossing the street, holding my box cake, when the girl suddenly ran into me. The impact caused me to drop the cake, and it splattered on both of us. Pure accident. I stressed that I didn't blame the little girl. It was just bad luck combined with poor supervision. The officer nodded, then went over to speak with the mother again. That's when one of the witnesses, the woman who had been walking behind me, stepped forward and told the police she saw everything. She confirmed that the girl had been running around wildly, ignoring her mom's warnings, and that she had slammed into me. Another bystander chimed in, agreeing. Even the woman standing near the church called out that she saw the exact same thing. Despite 3 separate people backing me up, the mother wouldn't back down. She kept insisting I owed her for the ruined dress and for traumatizing her daughter. She wanted me to hand over cash on the spot. The officers finally had to raise their voices to get her to stop yelling. One of them even told her that if she didn't calm down, she could be arrested for disorderly conduct. That seemed to shake her enough that she stopped screaming, but she still glared at me like I'd personally ruined her life. Meanwhile, her relatives began pouring out of the church, apparently having heard the commotion. A couple of them tried to calm her down, pulling her to the side and speaking to the officers. From the looks on their faces, even they knew she was blowing things way out of proportion. The whole ordeal took maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. By the end of it, the police made it clear no money was changing hands that day. It was an accident, and there was no evidence of intentional harm. The officers told us both to move on and suggested we exchange contact info if we wanted to deal with it later. I just wanted out of there. My cake was ruined, my pants were stained, and I was exhausted. I figured the mother would eventually cool off once she realized she had no case. I didn't even bother asking for her info because, frankly, I just wanted to get home, clean up, and forget the whole thing ever happened. But the mother wasn't done. As I was leaving, she shouted after me, "You'll pay for this? I'll make sure of it." I rolled my eyes, thinking it was just empty bluster. Surely, no reasonable person would actually pursue this further, right? Wrong. After the police left, and I finally got home, I honestly thought that was the end of it. The whole thing had been humiliating, sure, but I figured the mother would calm down once the adrenaline wore off and she realized she didn't have a leg to stand on. I told myself it was just another weird story to laugh about later. Remember that time a kid ran into me, destroyed my cake, and her mom had a meltdown in the street? But apparently, she wasn't willing to let it go. For a couple of weeks, I didn't hear anything. I cleaned up, replaced my ruined pants, and moved on with life. Then, one afternoon, I got a message from a friend. "Hey, isn't this you?" Attached was a short video clip. Sure enough, it was the incident. Someone had filmed the entire thing on their phone. The video showed me carrying the cake, the little girl running straight into me, the box hitting the pavement, and the chocolate explosion all over both of us. It even captured the mother running up, screaming in my face. It was crystal clear what had happened. Anyone watching could tell it was an accident caused by the little girl not paying attention. I didn't post the video, but apparently it had already made its way around our small town. And in a place where everybody knows everybody, it didn't take long for the mother to find out my name. From there, it wasn't hard for her to track down my address. Fast forward a few more weeks, and I get a knock on my door. A process server hands me an envelope. Inside are legal papers. I'm being sued. I stared at them in disbelief. She was suing me for $3,000. Her claims? The cost of a new dress, assault, and emotional distress. $3,000. For a kid's dress that got some chocolate icing on the bottom. For an assault that never happened. For emotional distress that, if anything, she caused herself with her public meltdown. I actually laughed out loud when I finished reading. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd, I didn't know how else to react. Still, being served made everything feel more real. This wasn't just an angry woman shouting in the heat of the moment anymore. This was her taking deliberate action to drag me into court over something that was entirely her fault. I started digging around, reading up on small claims court. That's when I realized I didn't even need a lawyer for this. Filing a countersuit would cost me $100, tops. And realistically, the most I could get back was the replacement cost of the cake and maybe the filing fee. I wasn't expecting some giant payout, but part of me thought maybe I should do it just to make her see there are consequences for wasting everyone's time. At the very least, I knew I had nothing to worry about on my end. Between the video and the multiple witnesses, her claims didn't stand a chance. But a countersuit? That was tempting. I wasn't angry at the little girl. I knew she was just a kid, full of energy, not paying attention. Kids make mistakes. What shocked me was her mother's behavior. She could have turned the whole thing into a teaching moment, telling her daughter, "This is why you need to listen when I say stop running." But instead, she flew into a rage, embarrassed herself in public, nearly got arrested, and then doubled down by suing me. If anyone was traumatized, it was the people watching her tantrum. At that point, I decided I needed to seriously consider my options. Once word got around that I'd been served, a few people I knew started asking me about it. Some were sympathetic, others were curious, and a surprising number wanted to play devil's advocate. Well, couldn't you have avoided the accident if you saw them before you crossed the street? Or maybe you should just pay a little to make it go away. So let me clear a few things up. First of all, yes, the cake was in a box with a lid. It wasn't like I was carrying it uncovered, ready to spill at the first bump. The bakery packs these cakes securely. But when a little kid slams into you at full speed, both of your hands are full, and you're not bracing for impact, there's only so much you can do. The box hit the pavement, the lid popped open, and a soft chocolate cake with heavy frosting basically exploded. It was instant chaos, on me on the ground, and on the bottom half of that little girl's white dress. Second, I'm not mad at the child. I want to be really clear about that. She's just a kid. Kids run around, they don't listen, they get carried away in the moment. I don't hold it against her. What I'm gobsmacked by is how her mother handled the situation. She could have sighed, cleaned up the dress as best as possible, maybe even used it as a teaching moment. See? This is why I tell you to stop running and listen. But no, instead, she screamed at me, accused me of deliberately throwing cake at her daughter, and now she's dragging me into court for thousands of dollars. Third, the idea that I should have prevented the accident is laughable. Yes, I saw them before I crossed the street, but at no point was the girl anywhere near my path. She was on the grass the entire time. She only bolted into me at the very last second while looking backward at her mom. I'm not psychic. I can't predict a 5-year-old will suddenly launch off the grass and into my torso with zero warning. The whole thing happened in literally 2 seconds. And finally, about the lawsuit itself. She's claiming $3,000 for a replacement dress, plus assault and emotional distress. I don't know what kind of dress she thinks her daughter was wearing, but I highly doubt it cost thousands. Even if it did, it wasn't destroyed, it had some chocolate stains on the bottom. Ruined for that day, sure, but not permanently gone. And the idea that I assaulted her daughter? Completely baseless, disproven by both the video and the witnesses. All of this together is why I'm seriously considering a countersuit. Not because I expect to come out ahead financially. Realistically, the most I'd get back is the cost of the cake and maybe my filing fee. But because I feel like someone has to draw a line. You can't throw public tantrums, accuse strangers of crimes, waste police and court resources, and expect to get away with it. I also think about the principle of it. She's teaching her daughter that you can ignore instructions, cause a mess, and then let someone else take the blame. That's not the kind of lesson kids should be learning. Maybe if she loses in court and has to pay for my cake, she'll realize accountability isn't optional. At the same time, I keep asking myself, would countersuing make me the asshole? Some people say yes, that I should just let it go since the child is involved, and that suing back makes me look petty. Others say no, that if she's willing to drag me into court over nothing, I'm entitled to defend myself and seek damages too. Right now, I'm leaning toward filing. It cost me $100, and at the very least, it sends a message that I'm not going to be bullied into paying for something I didn't do. But I can't deny, there's still a part of me that wonders if I'd be sinking to her level. So here I am now, months after what should have been nothing more than a clumsy accident, staring down a small claims lawsuit for $3,000. And honestly, I still can't wrap my head around it. It's not the little girl's fault. She's 4, maybe 5. Kids are unpredictable, full of energy, and they don't always listen. I don't expect perfect behavior from child that age. What shocks me, what still gets under my skin, is the way her mother reacted and continues to react. From the very beginning, she refused to accept any responsibility. She ignored the fact that she told her daughter multiple times to stop running. She ignored the witnesses who saw her child slam into me. She ignored the police officers who told her it was an accident. Instead, she doubled down on this fantasy that I somehow threw an entire cake at her child on purpose, in broad daylight, in front of dozens of people. And now, she's demanding thousands of dollars for a dress and emotional distress. Meanwhile, what about my loss? That cake wasn't cheap. I paid $65 for it, planned ahead for it, and in seconds it was gone, smeared across the sidewalk because her kid was running wild. I ended up covered in chocolate, embarrassed, and left dealing with a screaming stranger in public. But I didn't make a scene. I didn't demand money from her. I just wanted to go home and move on. And yet here we are. She's the one suing me. That's why I'm seriously considering countersuing. Not because I think I'll walk away with some big payout. I know realistically the most I could recover is the cost of the cake and maybe my filing fee. But because I don't think it's fair that she gets to weaponize the court system to bully me when the evidence is stacked against her. I have multiple witnesses. I have video proof. I have the police report. Everything shows it was an accident caused by her daughter, not by me. I know I want my defense. But part of me wants to go further, to file my own claim, to say, you wasted my time, you destroyed my cake, and you don't get to walk away like nothing happened. The thing is, I don't want to be petty. I don't want to look like I'm stooping to her level. I'm not interested in punishing a child, and I don't want to come across as vindictive. But at the same time, why should I absorb the loss and all the stress when she's the one who created this mess? This whole ordeal has already taught me a lot about how people reveal their true colors under pressure. Some people own up, apologize, and move on. Others, apparently, double down, deflect, and lash out at whoever is closest. If she had just apologized that day, if she had just acknowledged it was an accident and moved on, we could have both saved ourselves months of stress. Instead, she's turned a 5-second collision into a legal battle. So now I'm turning to Reddit because I can't stop second-guessing myself. Why be the asshole if I countersued her for the cost of cake? I'm not out for revenge. I'm not trying to squeeze money out of her family. I just don't think it's right that she can sue me for thousands of dollars over her own child's mistake, while I'm left to eat the loss, literally. Part of me says I should let it go, defend myself in court, and move on with my life. Another part of me says standing up for myself, even in a small way, is worth it. So what do you think, Reddit? WIBTA.